If people have questions, they can ask questions, and we'll be able to go from there. If you have audio, digital, roll it. I don't know if, do you guys know who Karen Mossy is?
Yes.
Okay, Karen's been here several times,
Okay.
and she just is a magnet for EVPs. I mean, she was in here an hour the first time and got like 7, you know. So you can roll audio, you can take pictures, you can do video, questions, ask me, because I've got almost 5.5 years of paranormal.
Is there a better place to, let me ask you, is there a better place to take EVPs than not?
No, I mean, we've got, we had a Class A EVP taken in this dining room over here. If you haven't been, who's been to the house before? I know there's a few people. Okay, you got, yeah. Okay, so nobody else on this side has been to this house before. All right, I'm going to explain the history. The history is huge, and we'll go from there. And you know, we'll see what happens.
Pony up your $5 a piece now.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. We could never find the blueprints to the house. They used to stick them in the old newel post back in the day, but even on record, the blueprint seems to have disappeared.
Look at the cat.
There is a website
Black cat.
about the house in conjunction with our realtor called the Gardner Victorian.com. I haven't been up there in about a month though, so hopefully it's still up and running. It should be. But I can provide you, I'll get your email and your address. I can either provide you guys with a disc of a lot of different things. As far as pictures. Tom, you got a great shot of that, what looked like an apparition in the window upstairs. That was pretty cool. A lot of times in the house, what happens is, it's not so much what we've seen, it's more or less what people, and we've seen some things. And throughout the history of the house, everything seems to revolve back to this residence in uncanny ways. But what happens is with these EVPs and stuff, I mean, they can come up at any time. Pictures can come up at any time. Anything can happen at any. There's no one real hot spot anymore. There used to be on the second floor, which we'll go to. But what we'll do is we'll start in this room over here, and I'll give you the bit of the history of the house, and the history of the guy who actually built it. Is this gentleman behind this door here? You guys, if you want to get a shot of that, but I also have. It's Mr. Pierce. Sylvester K. Pierce, or he was known as SK, but his name is Sylvester K. Pierce. And Sylvester really is an amazing guy because he was one of 13 children. His father died when he was 3, and his mother was left to raise all of the kids by herself. And basically what happened was she had to start doling the kids out later on, you know. She had to start having them stay with other family members because she really had no means to raise all those kids by herself. So Sylvester was sent to live with his eldest sister, and she what's up?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of our lost members, it's Justin. Who knows this area?
I do.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Give him directions. He's
All
looking
right.
for Maple Street.
Find either Route 2. What I would do is, I'm not as familiar with the area that you're in now as I would be if you were coming into the Gardner area, obviously. Just see if you can get over to Route 2 as well, just off at a convenience store, get on to Route 2. All right, you want to, S.K. Pierce was led, did everybody get that? So S.K. Pierce was sent to live with his eldest sister. By the time he was 14, he had to go learn a trade. They sent him to work in this chair factory over here. And for 2 years, he apprenticed in this chair factory directly across the street. Ironically, they still make chairs there now, but it's a much different company, and it's a different, you know, just not by modern times, but it's a different chair manufacturer in there now. And after the end of his apprenticeship, he was sent on his own. He went to all the surrounding towns as a journeyman. By the time he was 18, came back and worked in the chair factory that trained him. A couple of years later, he bought it with his brother. His brother was with SK for 3 years, got out of the business. SK Pierce was left to run it alone. He turned it into a multi-million-dollar chair manufacturing, furniture manufacturing facility. He was doing about $2.5 million a year in sales in 1880. Now that's like $1 billion today, you know. So obviously he had the money. He wanted to, again, came from nothing. He was a prominent banker in town, sat on all the first boards in the town, all the major boards, and basically ran this chair factory across the street. There is a tunnel that connects the house to the chair factory that he had built.
Wow.
Okay, you can't go in there now because it's been blocked off and they filled it in. So, while SK was here, the house flourished, obviously. There's an original photograph right there. It's black and white right behind there. It's kind of, the light's not the best, but that's an original photograph that was found in the house. And there are plenty of stories and photographs about the house. The history is well known. So S.K. Pierce flourished here, and he became friends with P.T. Barnum. P.T. Barnum's circus train used to stop right over here. And he became friends with S.K. Pierce, so whenever he was in town with the circus, he would always stop here and he played billiards with S.K. Pierce on the third floor of this house. Okay? Norman Rockwell and Calvin Coolidge also toured the house. Norman Rockwell used to come here, and also to President Calvin Coolidge in the 20s came into the house. Think about it in terms of history. The house was built before Gunfight at OK Corral. It was built before Custer's Last Stand. All the modern conveniences, all the lighting in here was originally gas, so it's one of the places that didn't just blow up, because so many did. But if you notice the woodwork, he spared no expense. And him being a wood guy, took no BS from any contractor he had hired. We figured it took about 9 months to build with approximately 200 people on site, pretty much around the clock. Because there was a house that was here he had lifted and moved, and that house is 2 houses up on the right-hand side on Union Street here. So not this house in back of us, but the house after that is the house that originally stood here. His sons, S.K. Pierce died in 1888. His sons kept the house going for a while. He had 3. And Stuart, Edward were sort of like the rogue brothers. There was another brother, Frank, he was older. But Stuart was the middle, and Edward was the last born in the house, because the nursery that they were born in is still here. Okay? In the early 1900s, Stuart opened up the first Buick dealership in Gardner from the front lawn of this house. And the first Buick ever sold in Gardner was sold from here. We know who he sold it to, where the guy was from, how long he had the car. It's an amazing story. His brother got jealous and wanted a Buick dealership too. But he couldn't have it because it was spoken for, so he went with Studebaker. He opened up the first Studebaker dealership out back. So we had 2 brothers with 2 competing horseless carriage shops, because that's what they were, the automobile. And you know how car dealers are, If there are any here in the room, I apologize, but I work with them in my business, and they're fun, but, car dealers are always trying to get your business. To have 2 brothers with the first Studebaker, first Buick dealership in Gardner is pretty amazing. During the 30s, the 60s, and the 70s, it was a boarding house, all right? The guy we bought the house from is an interesting guy. You'll see a lot of his artwork on the 3rd floor. His name was J. Stemmerman. J. Stemmerman was an eccentric. The connection between him and the Pierces was that his aunt was the last Pierce house servant to ever be in this house. But they were both very wealthy families too, so they got into a card game one night, and Ed Pierce, the youngest brother, lost the Victorian in a poker game to J. Stemmerman. This house was in the pot. He lost the hand. J. Stemmerman came in, and over the years, he would frequent the house less and less. He had land in Canada, a house in New York, a house in Florida. So he would only come here in the summers. And he never really put anything into the house, despite popular belief. I mean, he never really fixed anything. So he ran it here for a while, and he stopped coming up here. I think the last time he was here was probably 82, 83. And the house sat vacant for almost 20 years, until Suzanne and I bought it in 2000. And then started the restoration process, and it was always a work in progress. It will always be a work in progress. But at least it's, livable. When we first came in here, it was tough, but, all the windows are 57 windows, 72 doors. Again, look at the woodwork. I mean, we're talking heavy. Look at these doors. I mean, they weigh over 300, almost 300 pounds a piece on those doors. And the doors coming into the house are 10 feet high, and they weigh 520 pounds each.
How do you heat the house?
Forced hot air oil. So when we moved in, and before the restoration work started, we moved in May, Labor Day, Memorial Day weekend, and the restoration work started in earnest that first year in August. And then, there was water damage all over the house. There are still, as we rise in the house, you'll see where you still need to fix ceiling that is fallen plaster. All of this is plaster molding all the way around. So it's pretty cool. We'll get into the ghost stories in a minute, which is my favorite thing, to be honest with you. But we'll start in this room here, and I'll kind of like bring you back a little bit. All the wood, all of the fixtures, all of the fireplace stuff, it's all original.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Was this house a bordello at one time?
Actually, it's funny you say that because during the turn of the century, a lot of people who are sensitive think that it was absolutely used as that. And they think that it started off pretty gentlemanly, but yes, it was used as a brothel during the turn. I was going to get into that in a little bit.
Oh, okay.
But it was the Pierce brothers. You know, they were in, it was probably, they may have been more influenced by their friends at the time. Because here they are, I mean, the kids, father passed away in 1888. So they think it was latter part of the 1800s, I mean, like 1897, 98, or the first part of the 1900s, 1901, 02.
Okay, well, you're going to get into it later, so.
Well, that's what we know about that, since you brought it up. And some of the mediums and sensitives that have been through the house, and we've had dozens of them, a lot of people think that it started off gentlemanly enough, because you got to think of it, during that time period, you still had carriages going up and down, you still had the guns on the side, there was a saloon. That saloon's been there for over 200 years, the South Gardner Hotel. So this was Wild West, back in the time. And they think that it got out of hand. And some think that actually a woman or a prostitute was murdered here or died here. But we don't know much information. The three spirits that we do have, that we do know about, I know a lot of information on 2 out of the 3, and I'll get into how they were discovered, which is a very interesting story. This room was used as the ladies' parlor. So when the ladies came calling, because, women invented business cards. You know that, right? Do you know that? You didn't know that? Ladies in the Victorian times had calling cards. So they would come to call on Mrs. Pierce, and just think the long flowing gowns, and think of where they put all of these calling cards. Their parasols were left at the beginning. They would come in, have tea, very, very proper. And 23 house servants ran this house. Wow. 23. And that's by census in 1880. So probably more towards 1875. And they would come in and they would sit and converse and catch up on the gossip, And then, because back then, women didn't hang out with the men, a lot. There was, like, pretty much the men would retire to one room and the ladies would retire to another room. So this is the ladies' room, which is nice. Beautiful marble fireplace. And it's all original right there. We've restored the ceilings, the walls. Again, these were all gas fixtures. The original chandelier that hung here was over 100 prisms. It was beautiful. We didn't get a chance to see it hanging because an auction company came in and wiped out the house of all the original furniture and everything. So that stuff still survived here through all that time. We saw a catalog of what they took out of this house before we bought it, before we even saw it. But they left Jay Stemmerman's paintings, and when you see them, I think you'll kind of figure out why, but they're pretty bizarre. So Jay Stemmerman comes into play a little bit. We actually think that the paranormal realm in this house did not like him and chased him out because his paintings are very, very evil and very chaotic and almost like multiple personalities, that type of thing. You'll see them. You'll know what I'm talking about when we rise in the house. So, one of 26 rooms in the house. Don't worry about that. This room, again, these 2 rooms served as the store, okay? This room in here was Mr. Pierce's original study. This is where the men would retire to if they weren't in the billiards room on the 3rd floor. They were here. So, actually, the 2 spaces here were empty when we moved in. The auction company came in and ripped out 2 matching antique rollout desks from this space. So what we did, because the store was going in, shelved it all in, ran new electrical and all that stuff, finished the floor, finished the ceilings, the ceiling medallion. Just to stripe the plaster molding takes forever, because just think you're going around, you gotta go section by section, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4 dark green areas up there. And it's like striping a football field, really, if you think about it. When we moved in, we couldn't stand over here, the floor was rotted away. But you don't run down, because this whole bay area was just saturated with water over the years because the place wasn't being taken care of, But all of the windows are very majestic, all of the casings, all the ornamentation. very majestic. Now, a lot of this ornamentation, of course, has religious symbolism, which will come into play. The torch that you came in on, there are 3 stars of David that make up and support the railing there. It's very important to remember that for later. This carving over here above that, the breeze or the light right there, that's carved in. You can see the sword of the Crusades there and the arms of Christianity below it. When we go into the dining room, there is a rod that goes across the top door. That's where they used to part the curtains for religious ceremony. Because if you think about it, back in the 1800s, they didn't have anything but, they didn't have TV, they didn't have any of that. So it was all about religion and doing, the religious thing. So a lot of care went into this house. Very careful planning went into this house. And as you can see, when they were going around the doorways, you feel that wood right there. You can feel it. Actually, this isn't burl. We're not quite sure what there is. The leading wood expert in New England is still trying to figure it out.
It's gorgeous.
This is all original.
Tiger maple.
Well, we've heard tiger, but he says it's not. It's a very specific wood, and actually, he just restored Bob Vila's house. So he knows his stuff, but he says he's never seen this before in his 40 years in the business.
Probably imported.
It definitely imported. Yeah, I would say most of the wood here would have been, because it's all hardwood. And just look at how they just built it. Solid as it.
Yeah.
To build this house today per square foot is almost unimaginable what it would cost to build it exactly using the same woods and stuff. And just, back then, no power tools. Think about that. It's all hand chiseled, hand buffed, hand everything. In fact, the nails that were here, that are in the wall, they're the big spike coffin nails that hold up the framing on the walls. Those are probably forged right here on site, more than likely. The way they operated back then. But it's an amazing feat of architecture. It was designed by E. Biden and Sons out of Worcester. I can't find anything about them now, though. Not online, not anywhere. But they designed it under his eye, obviously. So, all right, we'll move out. We're going to go over to this area. Now, again, like I said, the house was always under restoration. And it still is in a lot of rooms. So there are some rooms like the dining room we're about to go into that, the wallpaper's stripped. You know what I mean? So it's not like walking into the Newport Mansions where it's pristine and whatever. This dining room, the best EVP that we've ever heard from this dining room right here. Actually sitting right at this table. You can see the dining room is just, when the wallpaper is going to go back up, it's just going to be beautiful. But look at the wood in the dining room. It is spectacular. You've got your chair rail, your wainscoting with the alternate light dark patterns. Again, going down the theme of the house around every window, floor to ceiling almost, practically wood all the way up.
Wainscoting is amazing.
Yeah, it is. And it continues throughout. It's unbelievable how they did that.
Now, how much work did you have to do to the wood when you came in? Was the wood you could-
Zero. Nothing. Which was the bizarre thing. There were only 2 rooms, not including the new bathroom that we put in on the second floor, that were painted. The ladies' parlor, was painted when we came in. So we kind of just painted over it and just made it look a little prettier. And the servants, actually the nanny's room on the second floor, the old nanny, which we'll get into when we get up there. Second floor is where we're going to start most of the paranormal history of the house. Okay. Does anybody need to use a restroom? Everybody okay? Okay. So this is the formal dining room. Let's take a walk down here into what would have been the garnishing kitchen, as it turns out. This right here is where they used to store the block ice. It's all tin lined. They bring the block ice in here, and again, he continued with the pattern all the way, not on the, look at this, but also on the floor, the light dark all the way around. This is under restoration. Everything in here is temporary. This is the, again, we just started working on the walls. Ceiling was going to go next, and then the floor was, this whole floor we couldn't save. Was just going to be redone all the way around. In fact, this was rotted out when we moved in. Couldn't stand here because of some water damage as well. Water was not good to this house. Not good at all. But, so this was the garnishing kitchen. We always thought that this was the kitchen, but that's not where they prepared the food, actually. I don't know if you guys are familiar with a guy named Gary McKinstry. Anybody ever hear of Gary McKinstry? One of the most sensitive guys you'll ever meet. He's unbelievable. He's got his own radio show. He's been in the house, good friend of mine. I can tell you things. He's just very gifted. And we always thought that this was the kitchen because the little boy spirit that's here used to like to bang on the pots and pans in the 1800s in the kitchen. But this wasn't it. And then I'll tell you the story later and how we figured out what that was all about. When you come through the pantries here, you have your storage right here. Come on in. On back, you could fit in my palm to the head. His eyes weren't open. And
That was huge.
yeah, now he's huge. So they took him in and they nursed him and so on and so forth. There you have it. Brilliant. A lot of closet space, as you can see, in every room. Built-in dressers, closets, everywhere, you know? Everywhere. I'll let you let these guys in. This safe here was S.K. Pierce's wife, Ellen. He had a first wife named Susan. She passed away. Ellen actually pretty much was a lady of the house, though, afterwards, because he married pretty quickly, I think, after Susan passed. And he had this safe. It wasn't here when the house was built because Ellen wasn't in the picture yet. So somehow they got this, you know, feel that door. Go ahead, take a shot. Who wants to swing that door? You can feel how heavy the door is, never mind the rest of it.
Oh,
So that's been there since. We found out the house was haunted, or I don't always like to use that term, but that there was something a little bit different about this property. From the good friend of mine, his name is Mark McCluskey, and he's a contractor on the house, and he came in originally when we first started. He was here from day one. We became great friends, and one day he said to me in passing that we should get the house checked and investigated. And I was taken aback by it because I thought he was messing around with me, because the house looks like it's a haunted house just by the outside. So we actually did. His two nieces, Jennifer and Jessica, came up and they investigated. They weren't, they didn't bring cameras, they didn't bring recorders. They just came. They're sensitive, so they spent a lot of time on the third floor. And the third floor turns out to be that's where the servants' quarters were back in the day. And they came up with 3 spirits: a boy, a man, and a woman. And the woman would have been around from the 1800s. She worked for the Pierce family. She was a nanny and a house servant. Her initials were MC or CM. And she was in her 20s, between the ages of, actually they thought it was between 18 and 22. She was from out of the country. She wasn't from around this area. She considered this the only place to be home, and she was in love with the owner of the house. So we had all this information about this woman. MC, from out of town, out of the country. They said she was from not in this country. She was from abroad, or they got that sense. The man they didn't know about, they thought he was closer to 50. The boy they knew nothing of, but the boy is very mischievous. The woman had a sense of humor and really cared about this property, and that's why she was still here. There were 2 reasons. One is she was waiting for her lover to come back, Mr. Pierce, and but they didn't think anything ever really went down between the two, and that she loved this house, and this is the only place she ever felt at home at. So we went out to the library, we looked up the census records, and sure enough, out of the 23 house servants, there was number 21, Maddie Cornwall. There's your MC, a 22-year-old female nanny house servant from Nova Scotia. So that's what it said in the census, and I thought, wow, that is pretty bizarre, because just an obscure person in the house's history like that, with the P.T. Barnums we knew about and all that stuff before we moved in. But more on Maddie later, because it happens. This room here is interesting. Would have been the master bedroom. This room is very noteworthy in the house for a couple of reasons. But the main reason is this. In April of 1963, there was a fire in this room. And it was a fatal fire. But there isn't any damage to the original floors or the walls or the ceilings, none of that. So he didn't really believe it. Until when the fire department came by and helped us place smoke detectors, I, in passing, asked them, I said, hey, listen, I heard there was a fire at this house in 63. Can you check that out? And he's like, yeah, I'll check it out. So he came back and he says, yeah, it was a fire. It was a fatal fire. I said, where? Where was it? And he said, it was in the master bedroom. This is the master bedroom. I said, that's bizarre. There's no fire damage. And he said, well, we thought it was bizarre too because there wasn't any fire damage that night, just to the guy. He was burned up like he self-combusted in his bed. Okay? His bed was burned. He was burned. He died. When the fire department got here, I talked to two of them that were here that night. They could see the flames rising from the window. Fire department's right up the street, not even a football field away. A group came through these windows, a group came up the stairs. When they got here, the fire was out.
Who was it that
His name was Sare, Saari. He's Portuguese-Italian. He was not a member of the Pierce family, but he rented this room. Okay, remember I said, see on the door, right there, right behind you? A lot of the doors have numbers on them because it was a boarding house. Remember when I said that? So he was an alcoholic. Okay? A big alcoholic. And as a matter of fact, that's all he ever did. So after we get through some of the stories that I'll tell you today, I told on the air at the radio station, one of our radio stations. And it was all set up. This woman named Sid, she was a psychic. She was coming in from Colorado. It was a good Halloween promotion for WXLO, the other station I work for. We did this whole thing with Sid. I told some of these stories. And so this guy burned up in the fire, and he's still here. Sari is still here. He was 47 years old. Now remember when the original sensitives came in, Jennifer and Jessica, they said a man about 50. He was 47 when he passed away. Spoke fluent Portuguese. So his brother was here. He always tried to get him to stop drinking. And I know this because his nephew and I crossed paths one day. He heard the stories on the air at the radio station. He was 10 when his uncle died. Okay? But he was here that night. But at 10, he knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to become a firefighter. He was so enthralled with all of what was going on, even though his uncle had passed away. So he becomes a firefighter. Where do they station him? Same fire station that responded to his uncle's death. He comes back into play in the 70s, and I'll continue that later on. His master bedroom off of here is what was this shelf collapsed. But anyway, this was the old an old bedroom when it was a boarding house. There was a door there. We took it out. I got some walls to fix. I haven't seen that. I didn't see that one happen. So remember the nephew, because the nephew comes back again in the 70s in a big way. And the only time he was ever in this house, his uncle would never let him in here. And I know this information about his uncle because he told me, he said, my father always tried to get him to stop drinking. And he could never find the booze. So when the mediums and the psychics come over, when they come out, this door used to lead to a closet. Okay, now it leads to a brand new bathroom that we had put in there. But before, you couldn't get in there. It was a closet. So to get to this bathroom, you had to walk out here and go around.
Was that the closet to this room?
Was that what?
Was that the closet to this room?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's right. That's right. You got it. Right. The Class A EVP we got from this guy was Porteo, okay? And I'll explain that in a minute, but whenever the sensitives come over, like people who are really, really sensitive, they'll feel drunk when they walk this path because this is the way you get to the bathroom. You couldn't cut through the wall, and they feel uneasy and they feel sick. Then they'll have to leave for a minute or just compose themselves. But that's all he did was drink, come in, go to the bathroom, go back. That's all he did until that night.
So he was probably a very depressed person.
It seems to be. It seems to be. It seems to be. This was the old nanny's room. This is where the nanny slept. She was the upper echelon. I'm talking about Maddie now. Maddie would stay in this room, and you could see the difference in woodwork. Look at the difference in woodwork. And actually, there was not a ceiling medallion there originally. It's a brand new ceiling. We put one up for Victoria. And this is where she stayed, but the woodwork is plain. See, she's a servant, so she doesn't get good woodwork. That's basically the way it works. This was not a closet originally, but this is where the dumbwaiter stops.
Mark,
Ye-
Pierce Street? What street are you on? Pearson?
Pearson,
Boulevard?
okay, but what does he see next to him? Does
Where's
he?
he next to you? He's at Central on Pierce. And I would have stopped him.
Is that okay? I think he went he's got to go around that road. He's going to get back and go towards, come back down Pearson and go around the road. He needs to go where, this is where Maddie stayed and took care of the children. These doors, that's not a closet, that's like a little breezeway that goes to the nursery, which I'll show you. But this is where the dumbwaiter stopped. It went all the way from the basement to here. It would stop here. That's where it all stopped. You guys remember that part.
Yeah.
And as you can see, just by walking a short distance between the two rooms, in Annie's room and the nursery room, the woodwork comes right back to where it was throughout the rest of the house. Definitely a room of prominence. This was the nursery, so it gets a ceiling medallion. It gets all the fancy woodwork. It also, this is, you can see the old gas line here. So the old gas came in for lighting, I'm sure. So it has a sink too, by the way.
Get out of the way.
No, go right ahead. Go right back. This is a stairway that goes down to the front hall.
Oh, isn't it crazy? It's crazy. Crazy. It's just the history. It's overwhelming, you know, a little bit.
Just think of the hours that had to go into every piece.
Oh, it's just, I know. I mean, the history, that's why I just love this house. You can see here some lions' faces up in these cornices. There are 3 sets in the nursery, one here leading down the hallway to the nursery. This one over this bedroom here. Religious protection. You can see the lions' faces right in there. There's another spare bedroom. Again, some ceiling work, but basically another sink. This would have been a room of prominence, maybe for important guests or what have you. It has a ceiling medallion. Any room that does is a room of prominence, especially on the 2nd floor. Let me get a light.
Taylor, which is the Victorian?
Which one?
There?
No, we're not there yet, Tom. We're gonna get there though. We're way up. I'm just gonna run downstairs and check. Sure, that's cool. They make one long enough to go, and they would have to fabricate it, and we just never get around to getting it. You know, all those would have to be repointed. And you know, to be honest with you, I don't know if I chance it anyway. It's, you know, it survives so much. I mean, the lightning out here is crazy some nights, and you know, I hate to burn the damn thing down. You know, come on up. Let me open up these doors. These are some of the paintings that I was mentioning earlier from Jay Stammerman. Not all of them are his, but 99% are. This is an interesting floor for a lot of reasons. A lot of paranormal stuff has happened up here. One of the most bizarre stories and the most bizarre circumstances that I've ever run into in my entire life happened here. It was just, and I'll tell you the story. As I mentioned, we had the 3 spirits, Maddie and the man Enos and the boy. But we didn't know anything about the other 2 until afterwards. We did know about Maddie because she was mentioned to us, but we never really said anything to anybody because there weren't any investigations at the time. we knew that Maddie was here, which is funny finding the same person in the census records. And it was just a bizarre thing. So we never mentioned it. One night I came home from work rather late. It was a Friday night. And I went across the street to the pizza shop you guys went to earlier. And as I'm coming out of the pizza shop, there were two gentlemen in the pizza shop parking lot that didn't look like they belonged anywhere. Actually, certainly not together, but definitely nowhere from around here. One had a long beard, long gray hair. He looked like a wizard from Harry Potter, literally, you know. The other guy looked like a drug dealer from the streets of South Central Los Angeles. And I used to live out in LA, so I know what they look like. And this guy certainly had the bling going with the hat to the side and the whole, this attitude. And it just was very out of place. And as I came across the street, they were whistling the Addams Family theme. So they were basically giving me a rash. So I was getting a little irritated. And as I got closer to them, they stopped. But as I decided not to pursue any conversation with these guys, I turned around to walk into the pizza shop, and they started up again. And I turned around and I said, you know, what are you guys doing? I know you're just doing it to irritate me. And we got into kind of like off on the wrong foot. And I said, you know, whatever. I was irritated. I forgot it. I went inside the shop. They followed me in, and they apologized up and down, and they didn't mean it, and blah, blah, blah. And so we got off on the wrong foot. Turns out they were brothers. So that explains the difference in appearance, okay? The guy with the beard and the hair, his name was Bill Wallace. The other guy, I don't remember what his brother's name was, but they ended up by coming in the house for a tour. But before we brought them in, again, no hauntings. We didn't mention anything about no paranormal, nothing. I mean, the place has had speculation over years, but we didn't say anything about anything yet. And as they're coming through the house, before they got in, we put the dog in the cellar. Did anybody see the dog when you came in? All right, he's outside now. His name's Bear, and he's about this big. You guys saw.
He's Bear.
Yeah,
You saw last. You guys saw. He's about this big, and he's big and yellow, and he's a great dog, but he can be very intimidating. So I wasn't taking any chances. Put him in the. Had Suzanne called on my cell phone. Put him in the cellar. These guys come out of the pizza shop now. We walk across the street. We start touring the house like we're doing now. Go all the way up into the tower, all the way back down, having fun. They were into history. Nice guys. You know, it was pretty cool. So we got over here at that door, and all of a sudden the conversation stopped on a dime. The atmosphere changed on a dime. It was very, like you knew something really bad was going to happen, but you didn't quite know what was going to come your way. And it just got very tense there for a second, and I didn't have a good feeling, and you could just feel it. It was Suzanne, myself, and these two brothers. The guy with the beard and the hair is right here. His name's Bill Wallace, like I said. He clutches his chest and kind of collapses up against this, like he's having a heart attack. So I figured, shit, he's having a heart attack, and now we need to get an ambulance. I'm freaking out because he's in my house, you know, and it's like, we got to get this guy some help. And it was very chaotic. All of a sudden, I went to get his brother, and his brother was gone. He ran down the stairs. Second thought, oh, diversion, this guy's going to rip me off. I made a mistake bringing them in here, right? I went running down the stairs after his brother. Suzanne stayed up here with Bill. His brother didn't stop for 2 seconds. Plus, I decided, well, you can't take anything. You know, there's nothing to take. So he left the house, come back up here. Bill gets to his feet. He staggers up. Asked him if he wanted an ambulance. He said no repeatedly. Finally, he's okay. Got his composure back. And I said, Bill, you know, you all right? And he goes, yeah, I'm okay. And I said, well, it's quite a scare. I said, you know, what's up with your brother? And he goes, oh, he's a Roman Catholic priest. He hates it when I do this. I said, your brother looks like a drug dealer, Bill. You tell me he's a Roman Catholic priest? He goes, he works with inner city youth, so he dresses like they do. I said, okay, this night can't get any stranger. And he says, I wouldn't go there yet. I said, what do you mean? He goes, look, you can throw me out of your house, you can call me crazy. He goes, but I died 6 years ago on the operating table. They revived me when they did. I do see dead people, just like in the movie. And he goes like this. He goes, and I see her. I never mentioned anything about it. Suzanne never did. And I said, who? He goes, she knows that you know that she's here. I said, who? She goes, you know, the servant girl. She's right here. She's like right here. She's got a smile on her face. She has a sense of humor. He starts repeating everything that was said months and months earlier. And he goes, and there's 3 things she wants me to tell you. One is she doesn't like your dog in the house, because when she was here in the physical sense, dogs weren't allowed in the main part of the house. 2 is, within 2 weeks from this very day, there's going to be a problem between your big yellow dog and a female girl, a brunette, about this tall. And he goes, could be your daughter. Never met Victoria, but at the time, Victoria is this tall, and she's brunette. So, well, that's not going to happen because they grew up together. He goes, well, I'll just keep them on a short leash, especially around kids, and especially over the next 2 weeks. I said, okay, Bill, before you get to number 3, how do you know I have a dog Second of all, how do you know it's a big yellow dog? Because he was stuffed in the cellar. He never knew we had a dog here. He does this. He spreads his, shoulder width apart, points down on the floor like this, like I'm doing now, and he looks right directly at his finger. He says, "Because I can see him in the cellar from here." Which brings me to point number 3. There's something in this house she doesn't like. You need to find it and get it out of here. I go, "What is it?" He goes, "I don't know." I said, he goes, "It's flat. It could be a cloth, a document, a letter, anything like that." He goes, "It's in the cellar. Look for it in the cellar." I said, "What's a big cellar?" And he goes, "Yeah, I know." And then he does this again. He goes, "East side of the house, field stone wall, outside the electrical room where you have the shutters of the house stored. There's a staircase. And back of the staircase, there are stacks of mason and canning jars that you did not bring here. They were here when you moved in. Look there. That's where you will find this." And he leaves the house. I mean, describe my cellar. Never went in the cellar. Never been in the house before. You know what I mean? It was just so bizarre. And, yeah.
Was this one big apartment up here?
It was where the servants slept. Yeah, so pretty almost, you could say that. Like a dormitory style. I'll show you how it worked out in a second. I went down to the cellar, went through the mason jars, couldn't find anything. The next day I looked again and basically saw a mason jar that escaped my eye the night before. There was a label on the mason jar. The label said, printed on the label was the word peaches. Somebody came along, crossed off peaches with a red pen, wrote the date 1957 above it. But on either side of peaches, printed on the label, were 2 Nazi swastikas. Okay, now what did I say about the Stars of David coming into the house, the railings, the religious symbolism, all of this stuff? And I know the Nazis didn't come to power when this house was built. Doesn't matter. It still happened during the existence of this house. So there was something with this label on this jar. It's flat, it's in or on or around the mason jars. Took the jar outside of the house, but Susanna's my witness. That label, the minute it crossed to the outside, came up and just like blew away. I mean, there was no wind, and then there was wind, and the wind just kind of blew this label away. It was very bizarre. 2 weeks later to the day, I get a call from Bill Wallace. We became friends afterwards. He called me from the hospital. He says, "I'm calling you from the hospital." I said, "Are you all right, Bill?" And he goes, "Yeah, but Autumn, his daughter, who was brunette and this tall, got bit by a big yellow dog on the other side of town." And she goes, she wasn't telling me to tell you, she was telling me. 6 stitches, big yellow dog, other side of town. So stuff like that. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that happens a lot. The burning wood smell. I had a real weird woman in here once, and she was just stirring up all negative stuff. She said, "They want me to leave. You'll be able to smell burning wood." I said, "Get the hell out," because I don't want the house burning down, kind of taking it out of context. And sure enough, out of nowhere, it smelled like the house was on fire. This floor is where the servants used to sleep in here, and I'll show you this very interesting room in here. Now remember the mason jar thing, because before I let you guys do EVPs, I'm gonna just show you this. That's where the old house water supply is. That's the cistern. They would store the house water supply in that tank. There's a series of aqueducts above us on the roof in the attic, which we won't go to because you got to climb through the portal. But that tank goes all the way back there, and they would fill it up, and gravity would bring it through the rest of the house. So the servants got this. How far does it go back?
Yeah.
I don't have a flashlight on me. Right to the wall. Yep. I don't know how many feet. Actually, you can kind of measure it out because if you look here, you're going back from here to here. Go about that far. This is where the servants used to sleep, bunk style, military style. They didn't have much. I'm sure they must have had a stove up here. That's a definite given. But other than discovered, in quotes on. We think that this wall wasn't here when the house was built. It's a different material. It's not horsehair plaster. And also, too, that's not even close to what they have on the, for the bottom. So we think that they put this wall up later, and this whole room was actually one whole side of the house. So, figure 23 servants working for them. Sure, they were probably spread out among these other rooms. But I bet you a bulk of the entry-level servants stayed in here. So...
How often do you have things happen in this house?
I really can't answer it in a series of like every 3 months or every other day or something. Anytime. It's actually calmed down a lot.
Was it more,
Maybe I just don't notice it anymore. I don't know.
was it more during the renovations?
Well, it's always in renovation. You know, there's hammers being swung in this house on an almost daily basis, so it's just taken us this long because there's been so much work. I mean, just to redo the electrical and all that. I mean, that's stuff you don't see. You know, so I know the boy spirit has appeared as a boy. We used to think it was Alex not cleaning his room like he should have been because at the time they were about the same height. He looked just like him, actually, but in period dress, and you see him for a fleeting second, maybe a second or two if you're looking in the right area. It's like, Alex, you're supposed to be upstairs, and then you feel that he is upstairs.
Yep.
You know, that's happened a lot, actually. That mason jar comes back into play because that mason jar actually was the thing that got this guy to call me from Gardner, the nephew that became the firefighter, because he finally figured his uncle was here from 1956 until he died in 1963, on and off, more on than off. And he goes, that's where he was probably hiding it, in those canning jars in the basement. That's where they think he hid the booze, which got him to call me. But, like I said, the nephew would come back again, and he does. In the 1970s, probably 73, there were two brothers in Gardner, mainly South Gardner, who were bad news. They were drunks, drug addicts, and bullies. They would rape and rob you at the blink of an eye. When Stemmerman wasn't here, and he wasn't here a lot, even when he was still owning the house, they broke into the house with the intentions of stealing something to fence. Now think about it. Stemmerman literally was a music instrument dealer and obviously had a lot of time on his hands too. So they took out of this house hundreds of vintage guitars and musical equipment and, you know, keyboards and stuff, all the stuff that he had here. So, you know, if you got into the house, you could probably fence something and set yourself up for a little while. They came in, they were next found cowering. One of them was collapsed on the front, right over the side of the house on the front lawn. There was a report of a man down in the Victorian. So who responds to that call but the nephew? First call he ever got. Come right back to this house. Man down at the Victorian. He recognized the brother, you know, recognized this guy as one of these brothers. Cops come. They start questioning this guy, what's going on. As they're there, his brother comes flying out of the house. Another Scooby-Doo moment, misses the stairs, rolls right up next to his brother, petrified. And they said, we got chased out of the house. Cops come into the house, search it, nobody here, come back out of the house. And they said, there's nobody in the house, you're lying to us like you always do, that type of exchange. And one of the brothers looked up at the guy, the nephew, and said, I said we were chased out of the house. I didn't say somebody chased us out of the house. First thing Sid the Psychic was her moniker, came in and said, she stood right here and she said, Maddie protected this house. She had to get rid of a couple of bad men she goes, feel like the 70s. She had to chase them out. That's the first thing she told me. After that incident, the brothers were literally scared straight. They would never walk on this side of the sidewalk again. This is not folklore. This is fact. Because I've interviewed their sister and all the townspeople. They all the same story. They never walked in front of this house again. If they had to go by, they would cross and rejoin the sidewalk up the block. And they basically got straightened right out. But
they say what they saw?
No, they were chased out of the house. Something chased them out of here. And when Sid came in, she goes, Maddie she protects this house. She had to chase these guys out of here.
We have a lake camera at the front door.
Oh yeah, you want to go down the ground? Yeah, we've actually, the episode of Ghost Hunters, my daughter actually, or my stepdaughter actually, had a face-to-face encounter and wouldn't talk about it for years until she got a little bit older, but literally came in face-to-face with one of the spirits and just freaked her out, you know. When we first moved in here, Alex, of course they were much younger, you know, Alex would have full-blown conversations with nobody. Yeah. And you'd sit here and you go, Alex, who are you talking to? One of those situations. Yeah. Oh, nobody. It's like, yeah, you are. I mean, you know, what's going on? You okay? Do you have an imaginary friend? What? Nothing. I wasn't talking. He'd deny it, but, you know, I mean, it's not like he's in trouble for it.
Right.
So we leave, and the minute we get out of the room, it was in the nursery. Mm. We've got some EVPs in the nursery, like, why are you here? Don't leave. But nothing like that one.
Porteo. That was crystal clear.
Oh, you know what? I proved all my discs down in Worcester. You know what? Let me
Because you gave me this with all the
I know.
pictures and everything, all of them worked except that one. I was like,
I'll email it to you. I'll email you. Here, just write it down.
okay.
Porteo, okay, an EVP, gotten in the dining room. Basically, is there anybody here? Can you please touch my hand? That type of thing.
On what they showed.
Everything that was pretty much the way it all went down. They were here for like a week though, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So they interviewed one of the local historians who confirmed the history of the house. And he got cut. He didn't make the final cut. But it was pretty much, you know, the way it was is the way it was. I mean, they came up, of course, you know, 200, 300 people outside on the sidewalks. You know, big, huge crowd. They come, there's Jason, there's Grant, I love you, Jason. You know, you hear all this stuff. It's like a rock star.
Yeah.
It's like the damn Beatles came into town or something. But they were cool, and it was like, Grant, can you guys go out and sign some autographs? Because I'm getting really deluged with these people out here. And I would stay up all night and then go to work in the morning. Then they'd flash their generators and light up the whole of South Yard, well, this house anyway, at like, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning when it's pitch black. They were cool. It was cool. I mean, we've gotten better evidence off other investigations. You guys are here. We got some cool stuff. So, whatever. But it was just cool because the notoriety and the house and everything else. I mean, that was sort of like that was it, at the end. Because it was like the BBC came in a year earlier or 2 years earlier and did a show called Dead Famous, which was kind of funny, too. They were doing the show on Betty Davis. And they said, we know you don't have anything to do with Betty Davis, but we just think the house would be a cool place to shoot. We're coming over from the UK. I said, well, actually, the irony is that my grandfather was Betty Davis's chauffeur in the 30s. That's the one thing I remember most about my grandfather. That was the thing he was most proud of. I used to chauffeur Betty Davis, And it's like, I was like, who the hell's Betty Davis? I don't know, But, and so it worked out. They found some cool things. The Taps thing was cool. But again, they try and debunk stuff. I mean, too. So it's just the whole thing of the house, the whole mystique of the house. You take from it what you will. If it's haunted, it's haunted. If it's not, it's not. There have been some cool stories, like that story I told about Bill Wallace. That's true. The story I told about Jennifer and Jessica, the first two mediums. That's true. All that stuff's true. Things go bump in the night. Yes, they do. I've heard footsteps walk by my door and nobody there. I mean, my wife did too. She thought I was coming down. I thought somebody was coming up. So we kind of met halfway and we looked at each other. There were cat scratches on this door. This is kind of funny. One of the things that Maddie liked was she didn't have much. So she used to knit and crochet with the strings and get in here. And, yarn's expensive. Stuff's expensive that she works with. So we close the door like this, make sure it couldn't open up. Sure as shit. I go downstairs, hour or two later, I come back up. Door is open, cat's got all the yarn spread across, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Then I notice, look at these cat scratches. He really tries hard to get into this door. And no other door up here has it. None. Zero. So, they think that Maddie kind of like the cat or something, let him in, I don't know. But it was kind of strange because this door was, really tried. We were more than cognizant of making sure this was closed, and there's no way unless he got his paws around it like this, which isn't happening. But it would always open back up, and you could see how hard he tried to get in here all the time. The only door that he ever did that to.
There's still a lot of people in town.
Probably some, yeah, I mean, did you say it goes on, Taps was here 3 weeks, did you tell me?
No. They were about a week and a half, maybe, if you added it all up.
So they don't do just the one night thing like
No,
it is to
they
be-
make it look like a one night thing.
Yeah.
No, they were here for probably. The whole process took about a week and maybe a day. I mean, if you added, this is around the clock though,
Yeah.
practically. So, I mean, I don't know, if you added up hours, 8 hours a day, it was more than that. But they were here for 4 nights shooting, then they came back to Gardner, shot some from around the town, and then looked up this historian who I put him in touch with, got some stuff from him, but he didn't make the cut. Then they came back with a reveal,
Yeah.
set back up again, but a lot of B-roll stuff, a lot of jib shots outside. They had some really nice shots of the house, really nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they pull in like a bat out of hell, though. I mean, they got like, what, 6, 7 huge black SUVs. I mean, they look like, you know, like Men in Black or something coming, rolling down. And once they rolled into town in convoy, well, everybody just followed them here, you know, and the word got out in about 2 seconds that they were here. And the next thing you know, we got a crowd out front, which is cool. You know, the papers are all over it and so on and so forth, so. And to this day, Tom, I still can't walk into the damn Dunkin' Donuts without somebody going, and
Yeah.
you know.
Well, of course, they showed it for like 4 weeks.
I know, I keep getting calls. I saw it on TV last night. It's like, you know, calls from and emails from friends I haven't seen in years all over the country. And I'm like, last night it aired November 1st. But I guess they kept rerunning it.
Which paintings do you?
Oh, I want to show you these paintings here. These paintings are bizarre. Bizarre. These here. You're familiar with these.
Oh, yeah.
If you look beyond the foreground subject into the background, you'll see a lot of torment. You will see faces, subliminal. I mean, once you see them, they stand right out at you. You see them all?
This used to be in the hallway.
Yeah, that's right.
You hung
Yeah,
out for
downstairs.
Halloween.
Remember?
Yeah,
We hung
I
out for
remember.
Halloween. That's right. And up this one here especially.
One man, just one there.
See this one over here on the right, that's his granddaughter, which is a bit spooky, to be honest with you. That is definitely his granddaughter, because if you go in the other room, you will see other pictures of her. But to paint a nude of your granddaughter, as voluptuous as he did, is a bit off the cuff. And this painting over here, he forego the subliminal faces and went with subliminal phallic symbols. All in the grass. It's all penises, all the way in through the grass. Right here. See him? Which 3 years, I swear to God, 3 years moving this thing from this room to that room just to get it out of the way. I never noticed it. 2 women on a tour one day looked at this and said, "Oh my God, look at all," and I won't say what they said, but they were like, "Look at all of the grass." It's like, shit, yeah, you're right. I never noticed that before. That's his wife, Jane. Very musical, and some of the stuff is juvenile. Some of it's pretty cool.